Good morning, councillors. We right to go, Brendan? Excellent. Good morning. So, welcome to the Planning and Development Committee meeting for the Toowoomba Regional Council, the 9th of February 2021. The meeting is open to the public and will also be live streamed. I'd like to thank all of you in the room today and acknowledge the people watching via council social media channels. I acknowledge the Mayor, Portfolio Leader, Councillor Carl, councillors, the Chief Executive Officer, the General Manager of Planning and the Development Group. I acknowledge the Aboriginal parties whose song lines traverse these lands we meet on today, the Western Waka Waka, Tribal and Jarrawa peoples, and pay respects to our elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the knowledge, rich traditions and bold ambitions of Australia's first people. So item number 2 is the attendance. I don't think we have any apologies, no. No one seeking any leave of absence. We have a declarable conflict of interest. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The declarable conflict of interest is in item number 4, Toowoomba CBD Shop Top Living Design Guide. And I inform the meeting that I have a declarable conflict of interest in this matter as defined in section 150 EN of the Local Government Act 2009. The nature of my interest is as follows. The declarable conflict of interest arises because I own property situated at 435 Ruthven Street, Toowoomba and 2 Club Lane, Toowoomba. These properties are in the Toowoomba CBD and I, like other CBD landowners, could benefit from this initiative. However, I do wish to participate in the decision in relation to this matter, and I acknowledge that eligible councillors must now determine, pursuant to section 150 ES of the Local Government Act 2009, whether I, 1, may participate in the decision about the matter, including by voting on the matter, 2, must leave the meeting, including any area set aside for the public, and stay away from the meeting while the eligible councillors discuss and vote on the matter, or 3, may participate in the decision about the matter subject to conditions.
Thanks, Councillor MacDonald. So we are being asked to decide whether Councillor MacDonald has a conflict of interest by voting on this matter. Does anyone have any questions for Councillor MacDonald? Councillor Von Hoff?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Councillor MacDonald. Thank you. Do you own the ground floor level in addition to property above you, or is it just the ground floor?
No, it's a good question. The property at 435 Ruthven Street is ideally situated to be of interest to this proposal, and it is, and I'm an owner of that entire property.
Above as well?
Well, the entire property, so.
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Councillor Carl?
Not a question, Madam Chair, but I don't feel that Councillor MacDonald has a conflict at all. And my reasons being that this is will be a publicly accessible document, and regardless of a property owner in the CBD or not, it is open to people to invest in the CBD from both within the region anywhere into this type of potential development, or from outside the region. So I don't think that he stands to gain or lose any more than a vast number of other potential people that would benefit from this initiative. So that's my reasons, but I'm open to the challenge.
Thanks, Councillor Carl. And I think you have mentioned there that this is just a guide to a how-to for potential people who may want to look at shop top living. Is there any other questions? Thanks, Councillor MacDonald. Did you want to... Do we do the voting while Councillor MacDonald's here, or does he have to leave?
Oh, well, Councillor Carl could move according to what he said.
I'm happy to move that, Madam Chair.
That Councillor MacDonald does not have a conflict, yeah. So all those in favour?
Have we had a second?
Oh, seconder, beg your pardon, Councillor Shine. And then all those in favour? So that's carried. So we can't call for a division. So that was Councillor Somerville. Councillor Somerville.
So do you want some reasons, Mr. CEO?
The reasons, Mr. CEO?
The reasons would be this interest is no greater than a significant number
It's up on the screen.
Yeah, that it's a publicly available guide document only, and that it's open, the potential for investment lies well beyond or extends well beyond property owners within the CBD. In other words, an investor could come and actually buy or be partners in an investment in that CBD and not necessarily be anywhere near that CBD.
Okay. So you're happy with the reasons there, Councillor Carr?
Yes.
Okay. Councillor Somerville, did you have a comment?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like to provide a reason why I have voted against this, and that is that I believe Councillor MacDonald had a lot to offer in relation to the discussion on the matter, but I felt that given, using his own words, his building has the clear potential for these outcomes, and I felt that there was opportunity for benefit, so therefore I voted against it.
Okay. All right. Well, that was carried. So we move to item number 3, which is the Local Government Infrastructure Plan Review. And I think Josie is going to take us through that today. Thanks, Josie.
Good morning, councillors.
No, Josie.
We're here today to talk about the Local Government Infrastructure Plan Review. Last time I came to speak to you, which was in November, if you recall, I reminded you that council is obliged every 5 years to review its LGIP from the year of adoption, and you resolved at that point to undertake that review. At the time, I estimated it would take 6 to 8 weeks, and given Christmas occurred in that time, it took us about 5 weeks, and I'm coming to you now with the results of that review. At this meeting, we need to make a decision on how to proceed in light of that review, and that is the purpose of this meeting, and also to articulate the scope of what that amendment might look like. So, the review is undertaken in line with a statutory checklist, auditing our current LGIP against that statutory checklist, which has 55 items in it. Generally, we found that the LGIP has good bones. It doesn't need a total rebuild. Really, what we need to do is update some elements in it that, because it was done 4 to 5 years ago, is needing a bit of an update. And that's really updating the planning within that LGIP. So we have 34 recommendations on what the scope of the amendment will be. And they include changes to respond to legislative changes. So there's been some changes to the law and the requirements in an LGIP that we need to address. Then changes to update the land use planning assumptions in the LGIP, changes to update the infrastructure planning in the LGIP, and then a process to bring that all together into an affordable program of investment in growth. The scope of these works we consider is an amendment to the LGIP and not making a new LGIP, and our recommendation is for council to resolve to amend the LGIP. So today the recommendations are that council endorse the review that we've undertaken of the Local Government Infrastructure Plan, that council propose to make a Local Government Infrastructure Plan amendment under Section 21C of the Planning Act and Chapter 5, Part 3 of the Minister's Guidelines and Rules, and that council write to the Chief Executive of Queensland Treasury advising them that the review has been completed and that council have resolved to amend the Local Government Infrastructure Plan.
Thanks, Josie. Is there any questions? Councillor Shine.
Just in relation to page 28 of Broadbook's, in its item or amendment 31, there is currently only one future urban area from the strategic framework that is outside the PIA. This area has been subject to a DA during the life of the LGIP. Determine if it should be included in the PIA, consider an appropriate process for including existing or improved urban development, etc. Can you enlighten us as to what what DA or what area of land that was referable to.
So is it, sorry, Councillor Shine, what,
That's Westwood.
what
Page
item?
28.
28.
31.
So I think
Oh,
it's
page
item
28, did you say?
Yep, item
Yeah.
31.
Referring
30,
to
okay,
item 31.
31.
I can't tell you exactly what that is, but I do know where the areas that are outside the PIA exist. So in terms of current zoned land, there is not a lot of available land outside the PIA. There's under 500 hectares of available land to expand the PIA, and that's mostly around Highfields, Meringandan, with some around Mount Lofty and a small amount in Drayton. So it could refer to one of those three areas. I think this one, because of the DA, and I'm not sure, I'd have to take it. I could probably ask if my colleagues know, but I think because of the DA, I would assume it's the Mount Lofty area outside the PIA.
Can perhaps somebody else clarify that?
Westbrook, I think.
Michelle?
I actually thought it was Westbrook.
Do you know Stuart, please?
So I'm just getting one of my team members who was involved in the recommendations to come up.
Good morning. I believe that area was Meringandan. There's some around Meringandan, so it's in the future strategic framework. So it's the outside, beyond the life of the scheme sort of area. So there's a lot of emerging communities areas, but there's some areas, I'm pretty sure, there's a few pockets around Meringandan and that sort of area. So it's in that sort of Highfields, Meringandan, there's a little pocket of future urban area.
No, not the block that we dealt with last week.
No, I don't believe so.
Is there any other questions for Josie? Councillor Somerville?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Josie. So that, just going back to Councillor Shines, that number 31 says there's only one future urban area outside the PIA. Well, could we get details on all of that before the ordinary meeting of council, please? Would that be opportune to do that? So that we do actually know, please?
Yes.
But I did wonder, so these amendments, will this all assist moving forward in relation to our housing shortage that the community is experiencing at the moment? Is this going to be an enabler as we move forward?
This part of the amendment will be the review of the PIA, and the PIA has three elements that we need to check off for it to be compliant. So for us, the PIA is the scope, the geographic scope of our LGIP, of where council intends to invest in infrastructure for growth. That's one element of the PIA. The PIA to pass needs to have adequate land supply, so that's 10 to 15 years of land supply of developable area within the PIA. And that might answer your question on how it would link to land supply and housing affordability. So we're working very closely with our colleagues in land use to look at what's coming out of their land supply analysis to determine whether we can tick that box off when we do our amendment. I don't have the answer to that now because we don't have the data, but if it does if it comes out of that data that we need to expand the PIA to invest more in growth and we don't have enough land supply, well then yes, it will help with that issue.
Thank you.
And, you know, if I can just make a comment there, Councillor Somerville, even though it does feel like there's a direct link between the housing supply and the land supply, that's only one part of it. So it's so multifactorial that even yesterday with the meeting with the urban development industry, you know, there's so much to that question that is there a direct link between the land supply and the housing supply? And it's not a direct linear link between the two, although it is part of the equation. So,
Oh, look, I can agree that it's quite a complex issue, but at the end of the day, we have to do our part in that cog of the wheel and make sure that we're doing everything that we can do, because the community is hurting and we can't ignore that. We have to acknowledge that the community is under stress in relation to access to housing, otherwise we're not doing our job.
Oh, of course, definitely. Thank you. Any other questions or queries for Josie?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Josie. Through you, Madam Chair, items 11 and 23 in the report, they both talk about projections and how we actually get the data to cast forward. And item 23 talks about the latest economic development data, and item 11 talks about in that final column, update and confirm population and employment projections through council-endorsed process and seek agreement from all network planning areas that these will be used in the future. And so my question is, can you provide a bit more detail, please, about what those council-endorsed processes are to get the population and employment numbers? Because it sort of boggles my mind a bit. We've got so many balls up in the air that how do we, and there must be a way because people do it all over the place, but how do we actually, I don't know, do we take educated bets that a particular project is going to come off and that will deliver X amount of jobs and require a population growth? I'm just curious about how we actually nail down some of those details, please.
Thank you, Councillor. When it comes to the projections and planning assumptions, we're working very closely through the Toowoomba Region Futures Project, and a lot of the information that comes out of that is information that's provided by expert economists on future growth, and that's used to develop some assumptions about growth, which are called the planning assumptions, which will be articulated in the LGIP. But as we've noted, that's occurring through a project called the Growth Plan that you should be aware of and will be involved in. And those projections are based on best practice growth modelling that takes into account, so let me go back. With our LGIP, at the time it was based on census data and statistical areas. Since then we've had an update in the technology of these models so that they go down to a lot level, and for every lot it looks at its development feasibility, what could possibly develop there, and as well as its development potential, its attractiveness for development, and it distributes predicted growth according to a set of rules based on our planning assumptions. And these models do take into account the vast complexity of what drives development and comes up with with the best. It's not a guess, an educated guess, it's the best guess that we have in determining growth through these models. The model we're using currently is is considered one of the best in the state in terms of LGIPs, so we've made sure that we're not using second-rate technology to underpin our planning assumptions. But the information that goes into that is really going to be tested through this growth plan.
Okay, and a supplementary then, if I might, Madam Chair. So all that modelling that we do, and it's great to hear that we are using all of that, do we then check that against some of the big employers in town to say, okay, this project that you've got on the horizon that we hear you're talking about 800 jobs, is there that check that happens where we marry the data with the anecdotal and the boots on the ground talking to people out there?
I'm not sure how to answer that question.
Might just get the General Manager to
I might ask Michelle part of the...
I'll have a quick go at it, but basically we are not the only people playing in this arena. The community, the business areas that you were referring to also are involved in putting all this information together, looking at the information that we do put together and commenting or criticising or wanting to add to that. So the opportunities are going to be there, certainly. The other player, big player, is the Queensland Treasury Corporation. The Queensland Government signs off on our projections, on our assumptions for growth and development, jobs projections, but it's a fine art developed by economists et al. And statisticians, this issue of doing projections, because no one has developed a crystal ball yet, and until they do, we do rely on well-founded projections.
Thank you. That makes it a lot clearer. I appreciate it.
Any further questions for Josie? Councillor Carl?
Just a comment, if I may, Madam Chair. It's a timely legislative requirement, and you'll see in a lot of those planning local government comments, 8 years old planning assumptions need to be updated. That's why, and I remember a little while back I said to encourage councillors to be involved in lots of these information sessions and workshops around setting the strategic intent as part of a planning scheme review. Well, this is one of the little umbrellas that sit underneath that, and it's critical for us because further to what the General Manager said, Queensland Treasury, it's about our long-term financial sustainability and forecasting as to what we can actually claim as a council under the LGIP. So it's really important. The other issue that sticks out for me is item 31 about multiple growth fronts. This council will be faced with the challenge of reviewing an affordability issue on the many growth fronts we have as a legacy from amalgamation, and how we tackle that. Financial restraints will drive an orderly fashion for growth. In other words, an affordability issue for our ratepayers if we don't approach that sensibly. Just a comment.
Good comment too. Thanks, Councillor Carl. Councillor MacDonald?
Just a very quick one. Thanks, Madam Chair. Josie, I just note that a lot of the LGIP review checklist, the areas that where we receive a no instead of a yes is largely around the 8-year assumptions. And given the fact that this is reviewed every 5 years, I wonder why it's 8 years out and not 5 years out.
The last planning assumptions that were developed, the projections that were done for council, were done to inform the sustainable transport strategy, which was completed in 2014. They were done in partnership with Department of Transport and Main Roads, who were also doing planning in the region at the time, and we wanted to align those assumptions. A lot of the work that goes into developing a new LGIP takes quite a number of years. And when we were developing the LGIP, there were also some delays to approval through state government, which meant that the draft planning assumptions and the draft LGIP, by the time it got adopted, were already a few years behind or out of date. The thing about planning assumptions is the longer time goes on, the more likely they are to change, but they don't need to be updated on a yearly basis. Probably every 5 years, in line with census, you should go back and rebase and check against the actual figures whether your projections were accurate. So the last census we had at the time of developing the LGIP were results from 2011. We didn't have the 2016 census results in time for the LGIP. Does that?
So our assumptions will be based on the census, but also based on the consultation that we'll undertake through the various stakeholders, as well as a QTC. That's where we're at now. So it'll encompass all of those and the latest census data.
Yep.
That's right. So just a final one, if I could. If there's an outlier that comes up and it looks like whether it's something that's in the urban footprint should be in the PIA, how quickly is that process, or how quick can that process take place to include that in the PIA? And I gather QTC would have to be involved in that as well from an infrastructure perspective.
Thank you.
I'll have a go at this one. Look, I think, as I've said before, land does not have to be in the PIA to apply to be developed. Any land in an urban footprint in the SEQ regional plan doesn't necessarily have to be in the PIA. And in fact, if you have excessive amounts of land that might be a footprint area and you can't afford to roll your PIA out over all of them because council wouldn't have the money to actually roll out the infrastructure that would be obligatory if we did, then that's fine. The ability of developers to actually apply for and receive an approval for development, particularly urban lots, in footprint areas outside PIA can happen, and we have seen that happen at Westbrook. The difficulty is that the infrastructure often isn't there, which is again the case with Westbrook, and therefore the Act foresees or foreshadows that the developer would be contributing additional monies towards council so council can roll out the infrastructure. But there is no prohibition on development in footprint areas. There is outside the footprint areas, of course. The SEQ regional plan prohibits urban development outside those urban footprint areas.
I guess if I could just follow up just very quickly. So what's the process though, General Manager, if there's an outlier and it's seen clearly that we do need to include something in the PIA, we've got infrastructure that's close by that can connect, what sort of council process is required to include that in the PIA?
We can do an amendment, but I'll hand over to Josie because it is, I think, a major amendment.
Oh, is it? Right.
In terms of the requirement for these outliers would need two things really, and one of them is rezoning it if it's a rural land for urban purposes to make sure that you have the correct zoning, and there are methods within the planning legislation to address that fairly simply, but there's, with the PIA, because of those three elements, and it's not just about land supply, you can make an amendment through an interim amendment, but you would still need to demonstrate the other two criteria, which is that you can service that with trunk infrastructure, and by bringing that trunk infrastructure into the LGIP program, that it doesn't then make that LGIP program not affordable, which is the third element that we need to tick off. So there are alternative processes within the legislation for charging for infrastructure and charging for development outside of the PIA that doesn't prohibit it. It's just an alternative implementation pathway. So it doesn't, but in answering your question, it can be done through an interim amendment as long as it's not reducing the PIA. You can add land to the PIA through an interim amendment, which is a fairly quick process. We've just been through one. It doesn't need to go to state. It's through council resolution and public consultation.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Josie. It's hard for get your head around a lot of this stuff, isn't it? But so critical. So thank you. I appreciate your explanations. Any other questions for Josie? Okay, so the recommendation is there before you with those three recommendations outlined by Josie in the report. Do I have someone move that recommendation? Councillor Carl, seconder, Councillor Antonio. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you, Josie. Thank you. Item number 4. Councillor, I don't think you have to read it out again, do you? Just refer to Councillor MacDonald's declaration, and he is to stay in the room as decided by the vote. Now we are to talk about the Toowoomba CBD Shop Top Living Design Guide. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you. Morning, councillors.
Morning, Andrew.
Morning, Andrew.
The purpose of the report is to consider the endorsement of the Shop Top Living Design Guide for public release by council. The guide was developed in response to the vacancy rates above shop tops in the CBD, which is at least 40%, if not higher, and as a way of bringing life into underutilised space and generating additional economic and community outcomes by doing that. And it's quite timely given the recent media around vacancy tenancy rates, so less than 1%. So it provides shop-top conversions, provide an opportunity to create some additional accommodation and opportunities for residents to live within the CBD as part of that solution to that complex problem. The guide itself illustrates the process of converting the underutilised space, stepping owners, developers, investors, building professionals, real estate agents through the process of conversion and the associated regulation and compliance requirements. It also looks at various scenarios, including costs and commercial viability. And one of the key outcomes was scenario 1, which was the conversion of one residence above a shop was the most commercially viable option, with least complex in terms of time, regulation as well. So that type of conversion doesn't require planning approval or car parking provision, for example. The guide also acknowledges that other development scenarios are achievable as well, and multiple levels and multiple residences are achievable and commercially viable, but it really depends on the owner investor's attitude to risk and development as well. And the guide recommends they also seek independent professional advice. It does acknowledge the complexity of the opportunity as well, and in summary, the guide is not new policy or a change to existing policy. It provides an illustration demystifying the process for owners and investors to go through who may be considering that, so they don't jump in the middle of it and then find themselves in difficulty. It steps them through that process. So that was the intent of the guide. The recommendations are that the council endorses the shop-top living design guide for public release. It approves the use of the guide by council and other external agencies, and a lot of the regulation and compliance is controlled externally to the council in regard to that type of conversion. So they can use the guide to review that policy with the aim of encouraging further residential living in within the CBD. The council also approves strategic plan and economic development to facilitate workshops in partnership with architects and project managers to develop the design guide on behalf of the council, to engage with owners and investors, developers, to talk them through the process and have that start that conversation. And the council provides a budget of up to $9,000 to deliver the 3 facilitated workshops.
Thanks, Andrew. Terrific. Thank you. Any questions for Andrew? Councillor Shine?
Yeah, no, thank you, Andrew. Just for a start, how many buildings are there, in the areas that we're talking about, the priority development area in the CBD? How many, rough idea how many buildings there are?
No, we haven't done an audit of buildings in terms of numbers. And I've asked some questions of the CBD Revitalisation Action Group Committee in terms of the vacancy rates. I'm still waiting some harder data on there as well in terms of, anecdotally it's around 40%, but it may be higher. So we haven't done that.
Right. On page in the initial document, the executive summary, it says that the council 2.50 temporary CBD development incentives policy encourages that style of development, meaning shop-top development. Can you tell us, what's in that policy that does in fact encourage this type of development? What incentives are there?
Yeah, I don't think. Sorry, I don't see that point. I think we might have. It might be. The shop-top living design guide might be used to as part of the review of the incentives program. I don't think I specifically mentioned it as a...
So on page 3 or 4, it says Council's 2.50 temporary Toowoomba CBD Development Incentive Policy encourages that style of development. Sorry?
It's under issues and responses.
Under issues and responses. Page 3 or 4. First paragraph, end of the first paragraph.
Oh, it encourages that type of development.
Have you found
Temporary
it?
incentives.
Andrew, Michelle, would you like to make a comment?
I believe, sorry.
Yep, sorry, I've been on leave.
Good morning, councillors. The reference there is to the temporary economic development incentive that council currently has in place, which encourages or provides infrastructure charge relief in terms of new builds for residential accommodation or refurbishment. So they're quite substantial projects. The most recent example, I think the only example that we have to date of that policy having been applied for and granted relates to the redevelopment of the Gladstone Hotel in terms of the Oaks development, which includes some motel accommodation, but in that residential component of the economic incentives includes motels, residential development, that sort of thing, so both short-term and longer-term residential development.
So there's no, well, what I'm getting at is what I think most of us understand to be rooftop, 1 or 2 units above an existing commercial building rather than the new hotel. So there's been nothing implemented to incentivise that type of development.
That's correct, yes. That's my understanding.
Despite it being part of our policy to do so. What I'm getting at is that, number of people living, according to the report, or number of people living in the CBD type area is 1.4% of the total population, whereas in Wollongong it's over 6%. So what's Wollongong doing to incentivise, what's Wollongong Council doing to incentivise that sort of development that Toowoomba isn't doing? Because I'd like Toowoomba to do the same.
I'm afraid I can't answer that. I'm not sure of the Wollongong case in terms of what they're doing to incentivise it. I don't believe we specifically looked at that. However, I guess there's a factor there of Wollongong going through some gentrification, its proximity and its accessibility to the capital, and it's probably at a different position to Toowoomba region at this point in time. So the part of the role of this process is to demystify the fact that it's difficult to redevelop these upper floors and to perhaps give guidance to people to say there is an opportunity here that is currently unrealised. It may not be the full supply of residential development that we envisage in the CBD and PDA in the future, but it could contribute to reusing some of those spaces that are currently vacant. The information from this we could use to consider a review of any existing incentives that council currently has, whether they be financial or other incentives, and I think that this is contributing to the other incentives in making it easier for people to understand the process and aid in that.
Yeah, well, hopefully that sort of something that I agree with. I'm not too sure if I do, but what I really would like to find out is what we are prepared to do that other centres like Wollongong, and we're way below the average, not just Wollongong, of the towns that are mentioned in the report. And Wollongong was specifically mentioned as the standout example, and it would be good if we, between now and perhaps next week, we could find out perhaps giving them a ring, finding out what they do to incentivise that we might, consider worthwhile too.
Yes, absolutely happy to do that. And also, I think the other contributing body of work that is programmed for the future is the next stage of the City Centre Master Plan review. So we've undertaken that review, presented those outcomes to Council, and the next stage is the development of an action plan. Residential living does remain one of those key priority areas that we are looking at in continuing the City Centre Master Plan. So there are other opportunities to consider that review on an ongoing basis, in addition to whatever information we can provide next week regarding Wollongong.
Thank you.
Councillor Von Hoff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, thank you, Andrew and Michelle. I actually had the same question as Councillor Shine, because I wanted to draw attention to that second last page of the guide, and I'm very pleased that there was the Wollongong case study included, because it just shows us that there are other places that have where they've done this. Wollongong has pushed CBD residential living, and it's been a success. And I mean, I'm glad that Wollongong's included, but there are other examples that we've talked about: Launceston, Newcastle, Ballarat, Bendigo, and so forth. And I would just reinforce my comments. The Councillor Shine's comments, that we do have a look at what those incentives are. How do we lift from 1.4% up to 6 point whatever percent for Wollongong?
6.1, I think.
6.1, yeah. How do we do that? What's within our grasp, so that we can actually get people into the CBD and having these benefits that this talks about, you know, the enhanced nighttime economy with retail trade growing by 4% per annum over 5 years. You know, that's fantastic. Thanks.
Andrew, just further to that, would a part of it be just numbers, population, you know, the numbers of people living in those centres, I wonder?
Well, there's certainly major centres, and obviously high growth within close proximity to Victoria, Melbourne, and in Sydney, so that drives growth. In Wollongong, there was quite a lot of apartment development, multi-level apartment development. There's other characteristics which drive growth as well, which those centres have, which Toowoomba doesn't necessarily have in its CBD, like a university. In Geelong, for example, they've got a university in their parklands development, so that provides commercial catalytic lift as well, so that attracts development. So there's varying factors, and the research we did considers a whole range of aspects to that. But I agree that they're looking at their incentives. If there's incentives, what's driving that growth, and how can Toowoomba learn from that? Crucial outcome of the report.
Interesting to know. Can I just ask too? We've had a fair bit of publicity around this already, even before trying to run some workshops. Has there been any inquiries since this has been sort of routed?
Well, I guess I've got a session with some of the real estate agencies tomorrow through the CBD Revitalisation Group. So we're going to have that sort of discussion. I know a number of the architects are working on similar projects. Aspect, for example, have 2 or 3 opportunities which they're advising on. The one guy is looking to do that, establish a business on the ground level and accommodation upstairs.
So you think there's been
there is interest in doing that.
Okay.
But one of the drivers behind the development of the report was the fact that it was either at one extreme it was a really good idea and it was wonderful, and why aren't we doing it, to the other end where it's really too hard and too complex. And there's somewhere in between all that lies the answer. But I think if we can go to the market and say, well, one residence above on one level is achievable, and it's an achievable outcome, it's a really good outcome for the guide. And it's also something which if you drive through places, and southeast Queensland, there's lots of areas which are similar to the CBD in Toowoomba in terms of heritage and character buildings which are vacant and empty. So it's something which other regions can have a look at and start to think and have that conversation as well with their owners about how do we actually get people back into the CBD.
Oh yeah, so it's just so critical, isn't it? And not only the nighttime economy, but the activation and all of that. Councillor Carl?
Yeah, I think the question was posed, well, what can we do? I think this is one of a number of steps, and it's around, as you've said rightfully, demystifying the process. Landlords and property owners and business owners aren't necessarily developers. So one of the keys to opening up opportunities is a document like this, a guide, an education guide to demystify it. The other thing, if we're keen to see this come to fruition, obviously commercial reality will drive outcomes, whether it stacks up or not, for properties to develop. We've known from past experience that there are lots of small parcels in the CBD owned by different owners, and for it to be commercially viable, often some of those parcels have to be amalgamated. That's another issue. But one of the keys moving forward lies in item 2 of the recommendation that Council consider allocation of funds to promote the CBD Shop Top Living Design Guide in its 2021 budget considerations. That's where we'll, whether we determine we want to put some rubber on the road around it as well.
Thanks, Councillor McDonald. My apologies, Councillor McMahon.
No, that's all right, Chair. You actually asked my exact question around the demand for this project, but just to kind of mirror the comments around the room, no, we're not at 6% like Wollongong, but I think if we were to drive around our CBD and see lovely old buildings and think, gee, I'd like to live there, the too hard basket is something that comes up really quickly, and so I welcome this as a great incentive to tell people how to do it and how to do it properly, and we've said demystify a lot, so I welcome that. So I think this is really the first step into how we can build those numbers. So no, but other than that, your question was the same as mine. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor McMahon. Councillor O'Shea?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. My question's along a similar vein around the incentive, and I think a couple of good points have been raised around, obviously, that what we've put into this guide now is not actually new policy. It's something that sort of existed and has been there, or has been a desire, I suppose, around what was identified back in the 2010 Toowoomba City Master Plan. But in the actual document, do we have any reference, or did I mispass it, where there is the possibility of that CBD development incentive? Is it listed anywhere in that guide?
I think it's reference to it, but the incentive is at a level above the refurbishment of existing property into residential. So if you've got a $3 million type project and above $3 million, then that's when the incentive you can apply for that incentive. So it's a level where, you know, if you're going to spend $3 million refurbishing property above, then is it really commercially viable to do that? You know, it's quite a significant investment.
Yeah, okay. No, that makes sense. Thank you for clarifying that. Just a supplementary, Madam Chair, if I may. So am I right in assuming from what I've heard before from Michelle, I guess the next step, so we put this out to the public, it basically, there's now a document there where we can see what's possible, what's needed, all of those things. And is the next step of this, from our point of view, from Council's point of view, through that review of the City Centre Master Plan, and how, if Council ever decides that if this is one of the key priorities around how we provide, or if we provide some sort of incentive, like is that our next step of as Council around this process? So release this and then.
Yeah. In terms of strategy development, inner city residential development has been a key part of the City Centre Master Plan, and it also gives the basis for Council to look at how its policies and regulations around this type of repurposement apply, and how they can be potentially changed to improve it or speed things up or make it easier for developers. And certainly an incentives policy can be part of that as well, I guess, at some point. For discussion. So.
Councillor Shine?
No, thank you, Chair. One assumes that the two major factors against why people haven't gone into this to any great extent in Toowoomba are the time involved to get it through and to build it, and the cost involved as well. I understand that there are Australian standards, building standards that have to be complied with, which have to be complied, but there are other aspects that the Council does have direct control over, like the time it takes to approve the processes. According to 2.3 of the report, the design process, that can take up to 9 months. It varies, but up to 9 months. And then the building certification process, some more weeks. Then the construction process, of course, that can take from 3 to 18 months. You have to be pretty resilient as an investor, I would have thought, or as a building owner, to say, well, this is going to take a couple of years to put 1 unit or 2 units on top of my premises, and part of which is the process that council has gone through. So I'm just wondering whether, you know, there is prospect that council can streamline the process to cut down the time and the cost involved. You know, the other thing is that these are existing buildings that, from a layman's point of view, have stood the test of time. They've been there for 100 years, 120 years. They look pretty solid. But if you look at 2.3, engaging the overall project team, this is a great source of employment for the professional builders and architects in town. You need a town planner, a building certifier, an architect designer, a builder, building contractor, structural engineer, civil engineer, hydraulic engineer, electrical engineer, mechanical engineer, acoustics engineer, fire engineer, landscape architect, and a quantity surveyor. So it's really good to, you know, generate work, but pretty expensive, I would have thought. And I was just wondering, there must be ways that we can do that. There's another section there which says that the cost of putting one up is $204,000. I just can't believe that you could do it for $204,000 if you engage all of those people. That alone would be a professional cost, I would have thought, let alone building cost and so on. So sorry to just venting my frustration. You're probably not the author of this document, but just
I might make comment if I might. I guess I'll start off by saying horses for courses. If it is just a straight conversion of upstairs, which is musty and dusty at the moment and probably storing old boxes and lots of mice, that's a different proposition totally to building additional levels onto that building. And that's when you're going to start to need some of those experts. You're still, even just converting upstairs, you'll still need some of them. But what council did in 2012, or with the 2012 scheme, was to make it a planning application free. There's no planning application required if you are not extending in a major way any of the buildings in the CBD. So that's an incentive in itself, that you are not going to have to arm wrestle a planning application through the system. If it's really just conversion of 1 or 2 of the rooms that are upstairs already. But where the major effort comes in is with the building regulations and the fire regulations. They're the critical ones, and how you work your way around those is critical. Drainage, most building designers can sort the drainage out and what have you if you're not doing any major, or not increasing your roof area or doing any major extensions. So a lot of this is aimed at converting vacant space to active space, that active space being residential, and trying to maybe capture it's the 80-20 rule. 80% of the opportunities probably is just conversion of what's currently vacant. The 20% might be where someone wants to be ambitious, and that's the examples you just read out. You'll need all that expertise plus more probably, and a lot of grit and determination.
Well, perhaps the majority of cases that I think you referred to, just a conversion of the space. Perhaps that could be more widely known to the community, that it's not going to cost an arm and a leg, and it's not going to take a decade to do it.
That's right.
Councillor Carr?
Yeah, that's exactly why this is a guide, and that's exactly why I raised point 2 of the recommendation, is that's the time we actually help to aid the process of this publication and advertising it and setting out. And as explained by the officers, Aspect will be involved in the education process for the sector. That's exactly why we need to... it's no good having a design guide or a policy collect dust but if we really want to see something rise out of those or come out of those vacant spaces. And I might add that the PDA and the CBD area, when you look at it, it's quite vast for a city of this size. So there could be a number of opportunities, but it comes back to this education tool as a design guide and how we implement and promote that and help educate the sector. And I say the sector is not the development sector, it's the property owners, landlords and business owners who aren't necessarily developers.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Councillor Carl. And Andrew, I'd like to congratulate you too on the report and the guide. It's fantastic. It's such a great first step to try and encourage, I think, what would be a great outcome for us.
Yeah, it's a significant opportunity.
Thank you. So can I have someone move the recommendation there before you? Councillor Carl, Councillor Von Hoff, all those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you, Andrew. Move to item number 4, which is number 5, which is the Regional Development Statistics Report. General Manager Stuart Summers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I might take you to graph 4. Basically, in December, we had 110 residential lots sealed or certified, which compares to 7 in November. And we had 73 to this point of the count. As I said before, we get stragglers of figures coming in from the building certifiers. But basically, council statistics tell us that in December, 73 detached houses were approved for construction and 18 multi-dwelling units. So it's nice to see a reasonable number of dwelling units coming up, or units. Graph 5, the average decision-making period for sealing the plans, the guys have been flat out, foot to the floor in terms of trying to turn around the seals, and they've done that in an average of 1.7 days, which I think is pretty good. The interesting figures this time relate to the calendar year's comparison. Calendar year 2020, which of course is Annus Horribilis, it's the COVID year. Interestingly, we had 2,738 development applications compared to 2,407 in 2019. So despite the fact that it was a COVID problem throughout most of the year, counterintuitively, we had an increase in overall development applications. Also, I thought I'd just mention while I'm on the feet, we've had some projections, I suppose you'd call them, only very, very scientific in this case. In terms of what's in the residential lot pipeline coming through, and basically in the area from now through to the 31st of March, from Christmas to March, we're looking at about 343 lots being sealed. That's lots that'll be on the market. They've been constructed on maintenance and going through to the market. The period from the 31st of March to June in the current pipeline, and by that I mean being constructed, either operational approvals being given right now or in fact in the throes of being constructed, we're looking at 554 lots coming through in the pipeline. So I might leave it there, councillors. Are there any questions?
Any questions for the General Manager? Councillor MacDonald.
Thanks, Madam Chair. A couple of things. General Manager, just to your comments around the DAs, 2,738 in the calendar year of 2020 and 2,407, and thinking that it's quite opposite to what may have been projected. I guess the incentives, and it's an example of how incentivisation can actually help.
Absolutely.
To shift mood, to shift action and what have you. So probably not a surprise, to be perfectly honest.
No.
Probably in line with what it was all about. The projected lots is an interesting one. 343 lots to the end of March. It's the additional 554 lots from March to June. That's over and above the 343?
Yes, that's my understanding. Yep.
Okay, so of those, the 554, is that all in one parcel, or is it multiple smaller
multiple
lots?
Subdivision developments around the... yep.
Righto. So, and these sorts of things, and there's a lot of discussion around lots, not enough lots and all those sorts of things, which is ongoing. It probably demonstrates the lag time between when the thought is there to when it's actually sealed.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I guess the question for me is that lag time, has that now reduced over the last 12 months for people making a decision to actually sealing?
Yes.
Okay.
There's been the market, the heat in the market has been a great activity stimulant, particularly for those developers who have estates that are multi-staged, and they're bringing on those stages much sooner than they would otherwise have done. We came through probably around 3 years of really low demand for residential lots, and then the federal government stepped in, as you say, with the incentives, and they've worked magically well, and as a consequence, a number of the developers who weren't planning on building those stages just yet have moved in to do it. It's very expensive. They, of course, don't go in and invest and build those estates unless they know or pretty sure that they're going to be able to move those lots at the end of the process. And so that they've been doing that. Obviously, things are starting to stretch at the seams. We're hearing reports from some of the developers that they're having trouble getting concrete products, particularly pipes and pits and what have you. And also it's stressing some of the professional services. Normally when there's a bit of a peak in Toowoomba, we can rely on professional services coming from Brisbane or the coast, but they've got their own problems at the moment in terms of servicing clients, and so the whole industry is really, really busy, and which is a good thing.
It's a good thing. So I guess it also demonstrates the confidence in not only our market, but the fact that these incentives may well continue on a little.
I hope so, yeah.
Thanks.
Mr Summers, can you just comment on, you said about the stages, so I've heard it said there's no new developments been approved in the region, so can you just comment on how that works in terms of the stages again?
Yes, basically if you look through the histograms or historic figures there, you'll see that there are peaks every couple of years, which is normally a major estate. For example, we'll be bringing the Habitat development to council on the 17th. That's around 1,000 lots, so there'll be a big blip there in our stats when we approve that. But of course the 1,000 lots won't be built tomorrow. It's broken down into stages of around 50 or 60 lots per stage, and then the stages are built depending on the prevailing demand. So yes, you don't have a large residential estate being approved every other week because the demand's not here in Toowoomba. I mean, if you took a view across the entire southeast Queensland corner, you probably would see that there's a major estate being approved every month or so, somewhere across the SEQ. But Toowoomba, in the Toowoomba market, we only need a few major estates to be approved every now and then.
In the state.
Yeah, and then each stage is approved.
All right, thank you.
As demand dictates. It's demand driven, not supply driven.
Any other questions for the General Manager? Councillor Von Holt.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Through you. Thanks, Mr Summers. When I was reading this report, my big picture question was, how do we stay on our toes during exceptional times that we find ourselves in with COVID and this exodus moving from the capital cities, and through your department and economic development in the last couple of weeks, we've had figures come through to us, and we've got the regional population statistics, and they're only released annually. The next ones are due for March, and those ones that we've currently got still show a net migration away from us, which we know is not the case. So those statistics, I would say, for us today are unhelpful.
Yes, very.
Then we have the ABS September 2020 quarter results, which are more helpful, more real time. And those show that yes, we are regional centres. It's not just Queensland, it's not just Toowoomba, but nationally are receiving the influx of people who are leaving capital cities.
Yep.
But yet that's September 2020. That's our most recent data, and it just seems to me that lag time is problematic.
Frustrating, yes.
So what do we do to mitigate that?
Well. The official stats, of course, come through with that lag. We are watching the environment in which we live constantly. We're constantly monitoring it. Then there are different sources for information, ranging from real estate firms that are doing monthly stats and what have you, through to stuff that we put together ourselves. So there's not just one source for all this, and of course we've got to read the environment. But you're quite right that the formal information coming through, there's a lag there, and there's not much we can do about that. Yeah, I can only agree. But I think I've forgotten.
No, that was the question. Basically, if I'm right, your answer is you don't just rely on the official stats.
Not.
You go out and,
That's
thank
right.
you.
Yep. Also, the industry is happy to tell us what they think's happening as well.
Any further questions for the General Manager?
Which is not a negative.
Okay, so can I have someone move the acceptance of that report, please? Councillor McMahon and Councillor Carl. All those in favour?
Thanks,
Carried.
councillors.
Can I have someone now that we adjourn? Councillor MacDonald, Councillor O'Shea, all those in favour? Thank you.
Only two. Is that only two?
Yeah, better, aren't I?
Go. No.
Oh.
Theory.
Oh.
Theory. In theory.
going to seek a motion.
We're good? Thanks, Brendan. Okay, we're good. Welcome to the Water and Waste Committee meeting of Toowoomba Regional Council for February 2021. This meeting is open to the public and will also be live streamed. Good morning, everybody. I acknowledge Mayor, the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Somerville, the Portfolio Leader, my fellow councillors, the CEO, General Manager Damien Platts and all of the councillor staff. Thank you for being here this morning. I acknowledge the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse these lands we meet on today, the Western Waka Waka, Guyabal and Jarrawa peoples, and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I've got no apologies, no leaves of absence. There's one declaration, it relates to me, and it pertains to item 5 of the committee report today, which is going to be discussed in confidential. Previously, at the September 2020 meeting, I made a declaration in regards to this. It was decided that no real or perceived conflict existed, and there's been no change in circumstances. If Wendy, you could just note that, please. Councillors, we move to item 3 of the report. That's the adoption of the waste management strategy for 2021, and I'll hand over to Matt Torr, the Manager for Waste Services, for this important piece of work. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, councillors. The report today recommends the adoption of the Waste Management Strategy 2021. Under the Waste Reduction and Recycling Act, Council is required to develop and adopt a waste management strategy and review this strategy every 3 years. Importantly, the plan also provides an opportunity for us to outline our waste management strategies for the next 3 years. Council's last strategy was adopted in 2017 and there's been significant developments in state and federal waste policy in this time. Some of the key additions to our new strategy include setting ourselves waste diversion targets, a greater consideration of the commercial nature of waste operations and the overarching concept of managing waste as a resource rather than a problem. The new plan identifies 5 key themes of waste avoidance and reduction, future capability and capacity, commercial focus, advocacy and collaboration, and education and awareness. Under these outcomes, the strategy proposes 18 key actions and associated timeframes to reduce waste and preserve resources. What is clear is that there's no single solution to better waste management, rather a suite of solutions that will together assist us achieve our targets. Together, the actions proposed in the Waste Management Strategy 2021 provide a clear direction for Council to achieve our targets and is recommended for Council endorsement.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Matt. Councillors, Councillor Somerville, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me all right? It's not very close. I'd like to thank you, Matt and Damien, for the work that's been done on this. This is a really important update to this document. It's providing cost efficiency, which we all appreciate, but also environmental outcomes that are very positive for our region. So I'd like to congratulate you on the tweaking that you've done and all the hard work you've done in reviewing what was previously done to ensure that we've got a really good document here moving forward for our waste program. So thank you very much.
Councillor Antonio.
Look, Matt and Damien, without getting into the sort of thing that Nancy's been talking about, the general feeling I get in this community is there's a lot of pride in how we handle the waste and what has happened over the years. And the O'Mara Road, some of the people who were critics years ago are now delighted at the way that things are done. And I just want to place that on the public record if I could, that I'm hearing that. It's good. The only complaint I get is that people don't tie their loads down well enough, and there's a fair bit of rubbish on Wellcamp Road, Drayton Wellcamp Road. But in saying that, thanks very much for the leadership you've given that, and I think that the fact that we've had so much less going to landfill, you know, that's another great thing too. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor MacDonald.
Thanks. Thanks, Madam Chair. Certainly endorse Councillor Somerville's comments with this report. Matt, to me, it's through you, Madam Chair, to Matt, it really is the convergence of the triple bottom line, the social, the economic and the environmental impacts coming together. It's a quality document that sets a clear pathway. I just have a couple of questions. The first one is regard to community consultation and talking about the food organics, or FODO, I think it's referred to, something like that, within the document. And I know we're probably not at that point of determining how we approach that, but did you want to just make comment on how that could possibly be implemented for a community to gain benefit? Obviously, it was one of the high bits of feedback that came through. So that's the first question, if I could.
Yeah, sure. So, as you mentioned, we did a community consultation process late last year. We had over 900 responses, which was very, very pleasing to see. And there was very strong community support for looking at ways to introduce organics, such as food, into the green waste. So it has been done at various councils across the country, not a great deal in Queensland, but certainly in New South Wales it has been implemented. So the approach we're taking is looking at the next collection contract that we have, our next waste collection contract, which is due for renewal in the middle of 2023, looking at that as a bit of a target date to, if council decides to go down that approach, that would be the time frame we'd be looking at. What we would be, the specifics of what would be implemented would be subject to a further council report for some of the specifics, but we would be looking at a service area, probably of the greater Toowoomba area where there is a bit of density of population, and essentially using the existing green bin service that we have right now and making that a weekly collection that would include food waste as well. So from a cost point of view, there's obviously an increased cost to do a weekly service of those bins rather than the current fortnightly servicing. But given the changes in the waste levy and the opportunity to reduce the amount of waste going into landfill very significantly, there are the initial investigations so far show that the increased cost will be met by a decrease in the amount of levy we're paying. So it really is a win-win to try to implement that. In terms of processing, we're also working with USQ, the Centre for Agricultural Engineering, and the Fight Food Waste CRC to look at how we can, or trying to quantify the total amount of organic waste in the region. So this isn't just council, but also agricultural waste, and look at the best way of processing. There's a number of different technologies around, from open windrow composting, which needs to be done in rural areas because it does generate odours, through to in-vessel composting and then anaerobic digestion. So through the work with USQ, we're looking at which waste streams can be combined together to give us the best processing opportunities. I would suggest that it's unlikely that council themselves would be doing this type of work. We would rather work with USQ and other partners to determine what's the best technology and use that to, from an economic development point of view, try to encourage suitable businesses to set up in our region. So that's essentially the approach we're taking right now. But as I say, it would be subject to a further council report with the details of exactly who's included, exactly the costings, and get the endorsement to move forward.
Brilliant. It just occurs to me that, in our region we have 3 very large hospitals. We've got lots of accommodation places, university, where, that organic food is an opportunity for sure. Second question is around the feedback with regard to curbside recycling, and 54% of all respondents have confidence that materials placed in their recycling bin are appropriately recycled. So that means there's obviously 46% that are reasonably comfortable, 54% aren't too comfortable. What level of confidence do we have as a council that what goes in those bins are being recycled as we would expect?
We have 100% confidence. We know that our waste goes to a material recovery facility in Brisbane, and we get a breakdown of exactly what materials go there. So a breakdown of glass versus plastic versus metals, and then the contamination. So there's about 10% that goes into people's yellow bins that is contamination. That does go to landfill because it's not meant to be there. The remainder, though, we do have 100% confidence that it is being recycled. It is part of our strategy in terms of the education and engagement aspect to provide more information, to make the community have confidence that materials are recycled, that it's not being dumped into landfill. So we're looking at how we can best do that. on a sort of similar note, we are looking at how we could do that locally as well, how we could process this material locally. And again, that's something that Council will bring back to Council to consider in due course, because having a local processing, not only does it potentially give us better outcomes in terms of local remanufacturing, but it also gives us an opportunity to give our local residents complete confidence and visibility of where their recycling goes. So.
Terrific. Just a final comment, if I could. I love the paragraph within there. You talk about the change of perception, a need for everyone to start viewing waste as a potential resource and to think about how to use that resource most efficiently, effectively. And I think that's part of your education process that you're working through, which is terrific. The other just comment within the report there, you talk about the rate of waste generation, 2.6%, while our population growth is under 1% or just on 1%. So it's not something that's going away, which I've very much enjoyed reading the report and the strategy that you put forward.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Matt, I guess my question is probably more about the national waste strat policy sort of in general. And I note where you're moving to more of the circular economy, where you're moving away from take, make, use and dispose. So I guess, reading the report, you go to think, and how part of that is that they want to, as a philosophy, increase use of recycled materials and build demand and markets for recycled products. Where do we, because we're at the coalface here with dealing with the waste, and then you're at the supermarket buying a piece of sweet potato wrapped up in a plastic container with Glad wrap all over it. How much sort of, where does the intersection of that make a difference? Like, how do you kind of influence those big supermarket chains to say, we don't want to be dealing with this at our level?
Yeah, so that comes down to product stewardship, and there's definitely been a push at a federal level in recent times to introduce more product stewardship. So that actually looks at what materials are used in packaging and how packaging can be recycled or reused. At a local council level, it is somewhat difficult. We can look at individual product streams. Plastics are a classic example where there is potentially opportunities for us. There are companies setting up in the Toowoomba region who are, it is their business to recycle plastics. So there is an opportunity for us longer term to engage with those companies to, and they use recycled plastics to make other packaging. So I guess where we can come in is by educating our residents around the need to recycle, provide confidence that materials are being recycled, and then working as best we can to generate local reprocessing that supports that entire circular economy. But you're right, it is very difficult at a local level to influence the whole of country issue that is packaging.
I guess I might just have a follow-up there, Matt, because one of my other questions was about our trial at council that we're trialling with a local firm with burning. Mm-hmm. So can you just remind me about that and how long it's going for and what the process is? Yep.
So the trial is with the local company Pyrocal, and that was endorsed by a council report around the third quarter last calendar year. That trial has only just commenced. It was delayed somewhat due to international freight being an issue coming into the country, some of the plant and equipment that was needed. The plant has now been commissioned out at Wellcamp Business Park. And it's been commissioned on a different feedstock that company is familiar with using, but very soon is when we'll be looking to utilise some of the materials that council has as part of that trial. So things like tyres, green waste, timber waste, and general waste, and mattresses. So they're the key items that we're looking at in the short term, and then there is the potential that we will be able to also trial pyrolysis of our biosolids as well from Watala at the back end of that trial. So we do expect that will, in the next couple of weeks, that will sort of ramp up a bit more, and I believe that they have an approval from council from the development perspective to run that trial for 60 days. So, yes, certainly during February, March, there'll be a fair bit of progress on that one.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan. I've got Councillor Shine, then Taylor, then Carl.
Thank you, Chair. Just in relation to that last topic of which you were just speaking, that doesn't relate to the recycling items that we sent to Brisbane.
No.
Just on the recycling items, you mentioned that we'll be looking at trying to do it locally. What have been the difficulties in not doing it locally up to date? And what's, will it be something that it's likely that council would be engaged in, or, for example, like operating the O'Mara Road facility, or would it be something that private enterprise might be encouraged to take up?
Yeah. So the initial work at the moment is suggesting that we may go with a hybrid type model, for example, but that's something that would need to be done following the initial business case. So the initial business case, we're looking at basically the high level costs and the high level revenues that we would receive, and then having a look at whether it's worthwhile proceeding. The next phase is really to have a look at the detailed commercial model, because there are a range of different models that you could use. You could simply do a build, own, operate type arrangement, or a council builds a building, gets somebody else in to operate it, or council does the whole thing. Now, in terms of the latter option, I don't see that as really a workable solution, particularly because you're dealing with the commodity markets, and council, obviously under the Local Government Act, has strict requirements around procurement, and we're not able to be flexible to meet the market necessarily. So I do see a hybrid model there perhaps might be the best thing, but there's still a fair bit more work to do on that to understand where the risk areas are and who bears which risks under that contract. So it's quite complicated and something that needs to be really well thought through before we get council to endorse a particular option.
Could I ask a further question, not on a different topic? You recall last year you gave a information session here on the bulk curbside collection, which to me means once a year you put out your furniture or something and it's picked up. And then when you look at the community opinions and expectations in the report, 97% of all respondents, etc., I think it's important to reduce waste. It goes down a list of things, but there's no reference to the public in that survey having been asked about what they think about that type of bulk curbside collection, which from what we read about what happened in Brisbane recently is very popular in other areas, and used to be popular, in my experience, in the Toowoomba City Council days as well. Why was it, if it's the case that the public in this survey were not asked about this topic, why was that?
So they were asked about that topic, and this particular topic will be the subject of a future council report to sort of look at this in a bit more detail, because there's a little bit to that topic in terms of how we would run it in different models. But essentially, the community were asked a few questions around a bulk curbside pickup. Firstly, whether or not they would like to see a bulk curbside collection service, and from memory around about 65% of people said they do support that. We then asked a number of questions around what would the community be prepared to pay for that, and I can't give you the exact results out of that, but certainly there were the majority of people were willing to pay something, didn't expect it for free. And we also asked whether or not they would like to see it on a street-by-street basis or on a call council and we'll arrange a pick-up basis. So the intention is to tie all that together into a report with some recommendations about costs, and also include some data around the take-up of the garage sale trail program, which was in late last year, which is a similar type of thing in terms of being able to work with your local neighbours to resell products. So I think that was mentioned at the information session as well, and we did have a good following at the garage sale trail last year. So what we'll do is put all that information together with some and provide a recommendation.
Very quickly, what I'm concerned about in relation to your answer is that if if that will be then too late to include some bulk curbside collection aspects in that strategy that we're dealing with today. If today we approve the strategy, which doesn't have it in it, will it be capable of being amended thereafter?
I would have to double check through here, but I do believe there is one of the steps in one of the actions relates to investigating the bulk curbside collection. So it is included in there just to investigate it. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan's
I had a similar sort of question, but it's under the community expectations that consideration be given to introducing a bulk curbside collection service, providing that it does not result in excess materials being sent to landfill. So it's under that section of community expectations, yeah.
Yep.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Shine, does that satisfy your question?
Yeah, no, I think the answer is that, to my last question, was that it's capable of being included in a strategy without, even if we pass the strategy today. If I'm wrong about that, you can correct me.
That's correct, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll come back to you, Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan. I've got a few in the line here. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know if it's the appropriate time to mention it here, but following on from the organic waste comments from Councillor Jeff, are we aware of the system that's been implemented at Grand Central for organic waste, and that all lessees use it at cost, and it's probably worth something we could go over and have a look at, I guess, and just see how it works, because I think I'm also aware that independent retailers, Drake/IGA, are working towards a zero waste model that's organic and everything else as well. And I know that Debbie Smith and her partner are looking at building a new shop in Cambodia, and that's what they want to do. They want to lead the way. So in New South Wales, those independent grocers actually have got that there. So it's a new area, I suppose, that we haven't quite opened up before, but it does provide a lot of opportunity, and I think that I'm very happy to see it in here. The other comment that I'd make about the plastic wrap, I don't think there's... I mean, you go and buy an eyebrow pencil and you've got 3 layers of plastic wrap on it. Every single thing you get is actually wrapped to within an inch of its life. And I think that there has to be some sort of... It hasn't improved, it's actually gotten worse. And the supermarkets have gone away from free bags, but you can have as many fruit and vegetable bags and whatever as you like. And the thicker plastic is all over the waterways and the parks and everything else. So all they've done is save money, and the problem is still there. At the end of the day, I think that there needs to be a real push from councils, state governments and federal governments as well, a lot more than there is at the moment, to stop all this, this unbelievable wrapping, 2 sweet potatoes or whatever else wrapped twice and sealed, and it belies what we're trying to do on the one hand, and then having all this it floats all around the place, actually. So I think that I don't think too much is being done. We pay lips, not we, the council, but I think the federal government, who has the lead on this, needs to really well and truly get serious about it. And I think the big chains, the corporate Woolworths and Coles and Aldi are probably the worst. So we can see, I'm very aware that the independent grocers are trying to move to do something about all that, but I think that we've got the big chains that actually take no notice of anybody. And in the meantime, I walk in my park every day and I pick up stuff every day that's wrapped around these things. Plastic is the worst, and I'll climb over rocks to get that, because we've got creatures there that will die. So I think we need to get really serious about trying to do something about waste plastic. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Taylor. Matt, did you want to respond to any of those comments?
Probably just on the first comment around the Grand Central. Yes, we are aware of the work that's been done there, and through Department of State Development do have a bit of a relationship where we kept informed of different technologies, and then just go and have a look at these things to give us ideas as well as how we can work together.
So follow up, through you, Madam Chair, have you been over to see what they're doing?
No, I have not yet, but I did receive an invite to go.
Well, I can organise that for you, for the facilities manager. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks, Councillor Taylor. I've got Councillor Carl next, please.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. It's already been raised a couple of times, but I raise it again, and may I humbly suggest through you, with the permission of council, that and to the General Manager, that this is an agenda item put on the Australian Local Government Association again, product stewardship, and with the LGAQ, our peak body. Product stewardship, for those who may not be, and I don't profess to know the ins and outs, but it's a responsibility and accountability by large corporate manufacturers. They take it under product stewardship. They have the responsibility of the types of materials they use to process and produce and package their product, and that's not just at the front end, it's how it impacts at the disposal end of the cycle and being part of a circular economy. So I think all local governments should be involved in pushing this as an agenda item, and I say that from a sustainability point of view and around critical resource for local governments. And I'm also pleased, as a comment, Matt, really on page 6 of the report, it talks about Toowoomba region is well placed to host and participate in emerging industry. I note your comments about collaboration with other sectors like the university and private and looking at hybrid models. That's really exciting. We've come a long way since our beginnings around waste, since amalgamation. I think there's been some good progress made, and it's really exciting because that brings to mind the opportunities for inter-regional type activities, perhaps, and therein lies the possibility of critical mass, enough waste to make a proposition work in the future, perhaps. And also, I dare say, and this is probably a question to you, are you confident that this strategy is robust enough to accommodate opportunities that may very well present themselves before the next review of this strategy? Is it flexible enough for it not to get caught up in a convoluted process before we actually seize an opportunity that could develop in our region?
Obviously, it's very difficult to say with any complete certainty, but yes, I'm very confident that this strategy is flexible, it's practical, and it's something that we can actually deliver on. And it does look at what technologies are out there currently and what we can see in the foreseeable future, and it includes that in this strategy. So yes, I am confident that it will last the 3 years it needs to. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Carl. Can I just have clarification from the councillors who were at the LGAQ conference last October that motion about product stewardship that we put up, was that voted down or did it get up and go through to the feds?
No,
it's gone up to the...
But then it goes to the executive.
Sorry, Madam Chair, the Mayor and I were there at the time. It was supported unanimously, I believe, and that now goes through policy executive of LGAQ, and then it goes on to the Australian local
ALGO.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McMahon.
Oh, thanks, Chair. Look, can I just, as a general comment, there have been several things already this morning that I've just been, I suppose, proud to be around this table and get to be one of the people that puts their hand up and says, this is a good thing, and this is definitely one of them. And I thank you, Matt, for the work you've put into this. We've all got to do our bit for, I suppose, the future of our world and our little sphere of influence. My question is around, in the challenges and opportunities, just getting the right colour bin right and the amount of waste that households use. And anecdotally, I brought forward a motion and it may be X amount of years away yet, but we start to look at things like an environment centre. Should that ever happen, I would really like to see some sort of a education of waste and landfill and right colour bins brought into that. But just the bins that the average household uses, and I know that green bins are going to every week. Is there any any conversation around the size of the bins and making them smaller, or perhaps tailoring the size bin to the occupants of how many people live in the house, get a bigger bin, that kind of question?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to clarify as well, the green bin going to weekly would be subject to a future council report if we decide to go down that organics path. In terms of the bin sizes, that was a specific question asked in our community survey. The most sought after alternative to our current bin sizing is a larger yellow bin, so a larger recycling bin. We do find that the feedback is that there's a lot of people who run out of room in their yellow bins every fortnight, and so would like a larger bin. So that would be the first thing we would look at. A smaller red bin is obviously the next step, but to do that we would really need to have a full take up everywhere of organics, really, because we would find people might struggle with that. The challenge is how to implement that. Obviously different bins have slightly different costs in terms of collection and also the purchase of new bins. So we need to look at how much it would cost and the benefit, and then the take-up as well. So I can't give you any firm timeframes now, but the next collection contract is the obvious time in which to introduce alternative bin sizes, and it's certainly on our radar, and in particular a larger yellow bin.
Yeah, no, my fear would be with a lot of kids running around, a red bin smaller would be a nightmare. So larger yellow I can work with. Thank you.
You could always go to cloth nappies, Councillor McMahon. Councillor O'Hara.
No, I'm right.
You're fine. Councillor Shine.
Matt, thank you.
How's that going for you, Ben?
Thank you for your report again. You would have been here this morning listening to the shop top talk. What if and when, hopefully, Toowoomba follows Wollongong and we increase the population by 6 times within the CBD, will that be manageable in terms of waste collection by our people?
So certainly Waste Services was consulted in relation to the development of that shop top guideline, and we provided some feedback around that. There are definitely challenges in any CBD area, but realistically we're not like Gold Coast. We're not going to have that enormous population. We would just need to look at alternative ways of managing our waste and working with the waste contractors that service the CBD to ensure that we get waste out in a timely and orderly fashion, rather than having multiple different contractors coming in at various times of the day, so that we're minimising disruption to the community but also managing that potential odours and vermin. So it's certainly not insurmountable, and it's something we'd need to work through. But thank you.
Councillor Carl.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Good point, Councillor Shine. I think I stand to be corrected. The GM for Planning's in the room, but I think I requested that as part of the review of the new planning scheme that we look at waste collection for all new developments as part of the planning scheme, and what sort of regulation or requirements we have around that, because that is moving forward with medium density, if it, or not if, it'll have to be looked at as part of the review, but also just general suburbia in our design, layout, street dimensions, curbside, curb widths, all that sort of public realm stuff. It's an important factor, and I have to admit, being around this table the last few terms, I think it's been somewhat overlooked. So the collective impact of that now and the size of the city is as it is now, it's an important part of a planning scheme review. Those important utility services to be considered.
Thanks, Councillor.
So as part of the Toowoomba Futures project, both myself and the Principal Waste Collections is involved in all of those discussions to ensure that waste requirements form part of that work. And buffer zones as well, so looking at those issues as well around waste facilities and other critical infrastructure.
Councillors, any further comments or questions? If not, the recommendation is there before you, and that is that Council adopt the Waste Management Strategy 2021, detailed in Attachment 1, to replace the Waste Management Strategy 2017 to guide future waste management actions over the next 3 years. Do I have a mover?
Very happy to move.
Councillor Somerville, seconder I saw Councillor Antonio. All those in favour? Carried without dissent. Thank you so much, Matt. And it's already been said, but amazing thinking and leadership to you and Damien. Thank you very much. Can I have a mover for an adjournment of the meeting? Councillor MacDonald, Councillor O'Shea, all those in favour? Carried. Thank you.
On the knee.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Infrastructure Committee meeting of the Toowoomba Regional Council for February. This meeting, as you know, is open to the public and is also being live streamed. I'd like to thank everyone in the room with us today and acknowledge everyone who's watching via the social media channels. I'd like to acknowledge our Mayor, Deputy Mayor, our CEO, Brian Pidgeon, Councillor Melissa Taylor, who leads our portfolio, fellow councillors and the staff teams that are here with us today. I acknowledge the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse the lands we meet on today, the Western Waka Waka, the Garbal and the Jadawa, and the Bigambal peoples who hold native title to the west of this city, and pay my respects to the elders, past, present and emerging, for they hold the knowledge, rich traditions and bold ambitions of Australia's First Peoples. We have no apologies, so we'll move on to the item 3 in the Infrastructure Committee for the February 2020 flood event, the complementary and betterment works. And I'd hand over to you, Mr Brady. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Good morning, councillors. Just the one report in front of you today. The February 2020 flood event, complementary and betterment works. Just a little bit of background quickly. Obviously this relates to the event that happened last February, the Southern Queensland heavy rainfall and flooding event as it was declared for the 8th to the 14th of February 2020. Since then, councillors, we've gone through a lot of work in assessing the damage across the region. There was emergent works undertaken initially. With those assessments, there was over 3,600 activities now required across 1,200 sites and over 575 roads. Under the program, under the guidelines that are set by the federal government and state government, the disaster recovery funding arrangements, we can only get funding for improvement to the asset only to its pre-flood condition, so basically a like-for-like outcome. This report looks at the opportunities of what could be done, as be it complementary or betterment work, and a need to, whilst we're delivering these other improvement works or these restoration works. In general, councils, the funding that we get through will be we've put in 14 submissions already, 9 of which have been approved for the like-to-like components. In respect to betterment and complementary, this report outlines a number of opportunities that would be well worth undertaking whilst we're doing those works and make good efficient use and value for money outcomes. Without going into each of those in detail, obviously, as noted in the recommendation, there's works in regards to improving the immunity of existing culverts that have to be replaced. There's other works to do, improve resilience, such as soil erosion protection and other works around culvert head walls, etc. And then there's a couple of major culvert upgrades that would be improved, which would be beneficial now, and obviously some gravel resheeting. I think from a consultation perspective, obviously we gave Council a briefing on the 27th of January, which gave a bit of background to what we were sourcing. I think the key question comes around the financials of what we're actually asking for there, councillors. And obviously we're putting in the submissions currently. The total on-ground works we envisage in the order of about $26.5 million worth of restoration works to be completed in the timelines allowed under the guidelines, which means everything's got to be completed well and truly before the 30th of June 2022. So the phase that we're in at the moment is the submissions have gone in, now we're moving into the design phase on the more major culverts and wish to go to market on those in the coming weeks. So we wish to go out with what we actually want to be designed, and that's in essence some of the elements noted within the report. From a budget point of view, we've currently, through the development of the 2021 budget, there's funding allowed for certain works to get underway this financial year, which we will be doing on ground, particularly in sort of gravel resheeting and other removing silt and other sorts of operational type works. But we've also got a small amount of capital funding there as well this financial year that can assist in particularly the design phase of what we're getting done, or what we wish to do presently. As far as the funding that comes in from Queensland Reconstruction Authority, it's treated very much similar to TMR funding. We get funding in from the state. It doesn't impact or affect council's sustainability. It's actually probably a benefit. If anything, it doesn't affect the capital budget. It only affects it's a nil effect on operational budget. So the money in comes in, so we spend the money, we get the money, so it equates out to a near zero outcome. So the impact, and as noted in the report, on our future financial sustainability parameters is negligible impact, and in fact actually has probably a positive impact, particularly from a Labor perspective. In respect to the 21-22 budget, which these recommendations are focused at, our intent through the development of the Capital Works program for next year is that these couple of projects, these areas where the capital funding is actually being asked for, would be prioritised within the Infrastructure Services Group requests. And in regards to operational funding, we believe there's probably funding that we've already will be getting allocated in the order of $23–24 million in the CNM. We'll be able to cover off those operational costs at this point in time. So we don't foresee any financial impact operationally or from a capital perspective on Council's budget now or into the long term. So I'd probably wrap it up there for the moment. Happy to take any questions through you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Brady. Councillor Somerville.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for that, Mike. You will recall I was confused with the financial at the briefing, and I must admit when I read this report I felt the same. So would it be possible to get a table done up which identified how much in each financial year, so this financial year and next financial year, what funding will be required, what funding we'll get from QRA, a breakup of the CapEx and OpEx, maybe, that would also assist, and the financial year. So would it be possible to get that so that it's quite clear in everyone's mind how much is going to be spent in this year's budget, how much will be in next year's, what QRA are going to fund, what's CapEx, what's OpEx? Is that possible before ordinary meeting?
Yeah, no, I can do a table up. It's probably going to cause a little bit more confusion. I've tried to simplify it where I could here. But, yeah, look, the funding's already in this year's budget. It sits there today for what we need in respect to doing the program. So kicking off the program, getting designs underway and those sorts of things. This is sort of the additional that we're asking for. When I say additional, it's still within the budgets for next year or proposed budgets for next year, but it's so that we can make those decisions on what we want to improve. We make those now so we can get underway with the work. But I can tabulate that as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Carr?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Through you, Mike, are you confident that the proportion of funding that you're asking for, you can confidently spend that within the cycle of the budget?
Yes, because a lot of the work is going to be outsourced in the next financial year, particularly the culverts. So all the culvert works will be going to contract. So the design works need to happen now. They go out to contract, so that's going to local design consultants. And then we'll advertise locally again for the construction works as well. So, and then council staff through C&M will be doing the majority, and there may be subcontractors involved, of the sort of clean-up, silt removals, gravel resheeting, grading, formation works, the sort of stuff that we do on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Harris-Sullivan?
Thank you, Mr Brady. I'm probably a bit confused too. I suppose in its simplest terms, something like the Newman Road culvert that was supposed to, if we're just replacing like for like, it's 135,000. But if we're, can't remember, it's not embellishing. What's the word?
Betterment.
Betterment. Is now going to cost 1.35 million. Am I to understand that then that's kind of, you know, we were always talking about leapfrogging these things over other things that have been put through the priority framework, prioritisation framework. Is that, you know, something's coming out of that? I
think it's the opportunity that this funding, so the 135k or that approximate amount is for taking it back to like. So there's no improvement to the immunity, no improvement to the culvert, the size, the structure. It's just patching up what's basically there.
Yeah.
That's what that is. What we're putting forward to council is that culvert is well under capacity for its with the development that's happened upstream over many years. And the opportunity is now where, yes, we can go up and just do a $135,000 patch-up job, and we'll still have flooding, we'll still have damage. Betterment work is about, okay, what can you do to stop that type of damage happening again and again, rather than coming back and going to the state or the feds every time it does get damaged. So this is a real opportunity to sort of fix a few of these things now. And it's incremental across the region in back after the 13-14, the 11, 13, 15 floods, we did do betterment works, different, and we got different funding. So we were able to upgrade infrastructure across the region so that infrastructure no longer gets damaged or impacted to the same degree as once happened. So this is what this opportunity is about. In regards to prioritisation process within council, obviously each group, we're yet to do that for this coming up budget for council. Each group puts their programs and projects forward, as council has done in the past, and based on those if there is a resolution on the books, that goes through as a high priority within council's realms. Our budget's normally in the order of that 50 million. All that's being asked for to be prioritised within that's only a few million, $4 million there. So I think it's a reasonable, the opportunities now, that's why we're asking for that opportunity to come forward now.
If I could add to that, I was the Mayor of Cambodia when that culvert was put in there. We've had 3 developments up at Cambodia, at Wairima, and the road is carrying a tremendous amount of traffic. Excuse me, there's been development up the creek, which is Hodson Vale, and all that water comes down there through that creek and through that intersection, through that that culvert. So it is definitely undersized, and every time we have an event, we have an issue with it. So I do remember also that in years gone by, money has been taken from developers to actually work on that culvert. So I think if we leave it like it is, the very next event we're going to have to go and fix it again. So, which we had a look at with all these things, and Council of the Day had a look and decided on that betterment in the other floods, as Mr. Brady has mentioned. So, yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. That I understand the process, and I understand the opportunity that this is the money that's sort of being offered at the moment. I guess what I don't understand is that, as you say, if we have a resolution, then it gets 100% prioritisation, doesn't it? And so it seems to be sort of not following a process, I guess. And that's what we always talk about, you know, this leapfrogging and, yeah.
You know, council through its budget year has a number of matters that come to the surface that it needs to deal with. We've dealt with a number of matters this year. We put funding at BR1 to Mary MacKillop School, stormwater drainage at BR1. That sort of took priority over other works, and so with the developers out there and the work that they were doing. In other, you know, other groups, there's other things that come forward at various times. So this is not dissimilar. So our budgetary process does allow for this sort of request, where it's obviously justified, and I think it is justified in this process, in this circumstance. The reasoning the request is now is that we're trying to go out to our design consultants. In literally the tenders are nearly right to go out. We're trying to get the designs done this side of June, so construction can actually start, you know, in July and move forward. We don't, you know, I don't want them going and designing a $1.3 million culvert if council doesn't want to support that. So the opportunities now, we can, you know, and we've only got that short window of opportunity to do this work within.
Councillor Chair.
Listen, thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for that. Thank you, Mike. Just a couple of clarifications, if I could. Do the projects need to be completed in that first quarter of 2022, or do they have to be substantially started?
No, they've got to be completed, 100% completed, before the 30th of June 2022. Our program that we're aiming for is aiming for about March next year, Christmas through to March, pending weather.
Christmas through to March.
That's when we're trying to get things completed
by March next year. So I'm just wondering, given Councillor O'Hara-Sullivan's comment, and perhaps it's something that this council could consider to bring to council next week, is just simply, and I note the recommendation, and I appreciate that, because that follows on from the information session in regard to the wording, where you say that council notes the update for the Flood Recovery Program 2020 and approves the following 21-22 budget requests for the following works. I guess if you're looking at your program to be finished by March next year, and it's done for these particular items, one would hope that you'd still have a couple of months up your sleeve, albeit there could be wet weather, whatever it may be. I'm just wondering whether, in line with what you've suggested here, we simply add the words subject to budget consideration, which would then align the prioritisation model align what you require and still fit in that time frame, so that you actually get the council approval through the budget process. The reason I mentioned that, and I probably would need you to comment on, where you mentioned that this won't have any negative effect or net effect of the financial sustainability of the organisation. I think construction maintenance, you're about $62 million capital program for this financial year, and albeit external funding, it still will hit our balance sheet, and I'd imagine that there'll be quite a bit of depreciation that'll roll in as a result of these capital works. So it will have an effect on our financial sustainability model. Between now and next week, if we can include it, I'd like a comment from our financial services in regard to how that actually would fit in there. If you do have the capacity to separate the capital works, operational works, it would be useful for council to understand the quantum, and therefore with an agreed parameter of $165 million capital works, up to $200 million, with the between 165 and 200 million being the dam spillway upgrades, which we need to do and complete by 2025, it puts additional pressure on the organisation. Irrespective of where the funds come from, it still hits our balance sheet. So we need to ensure that we are making decisions in the right process. So there's two things there. Number one is to come back, and I couldn't vote on this today, I'm afraid, because I need that information, to give council understanding of, through our financial services, what the impact actually would be. And the second thing is, and Councillor Harris-Sullivan did allude to it, what will go out of the program that's currently forecast to be in, and perhaps the jobs that might get pushed into next year may determine that, that may not get done this year, what will miss out that is projected to be done as a result of this program, the extra $4.5 million in betterment. There's a couple of things I'd like to go back to, and that's where I think the recommendation today, given what we've heard, would be to defer this decision to next week's meeting with that additional information.
If I may comment through you, Chair.
Yes, Mr Brady.
There are a couple of points there. In regards to next year's capital works program, as council has not considered that as yet, there's no in or out that can be done at this point in time. Obviously, it's yet to go through its whole prioritisation process and stuff like that. So the impact on next year's program will be dependent on how council considers that capital works program for council. So I can't really indicate to you. I mean, it's not dissimilar program to this year. There's reconstructions, there's rehabilitations, there's gravel resheetings, there's some culvert renewals and different other projects that are in there, street improvements, Russell Street, other sorts of projects that are ongoing. So we've got a number of ongoing. So as council's yet to commit to a capital program for next year, it's a bit hard to sort of say what will be captured and what won't for next year. In regards to depreciation, there's no additional depreciation on council's balance sheet from the operational expenditure. So the vast majority of this work is renewal work, very much, okay? Vast majority of this work is renewal. So it's basically putting things back like for like. There then is a small portion, possibly in the order of 20% or so, that is actually could be classified as potentially capital upgrade. Okay, so that's where that split is. So that, yes, has a very small effect in a $2.4 billion asset value. A few million dollars there in that asset depreciation has, again, a negligible effect, and no additional effect than what would happen in next year's budget in any case. From what we'd be putting through, that would be a mixture of renewals and upgrades. So this would fit that portion in any case. So the net effect in respect to depreciation, this in the budget or something else in the budget would be negligible, as far as I'd nearly say at zero overall. I take on board Council's commitments to its budget process, and this isn't trying to shortcut anything there, and hopefully it's not seen that way. It's trying to take the opportunity that's actually there now to work with government, to work with our contractors, our consultants, our local businesses, to try to get this program up and moving in a meaningful way now, than trying to delay it any further than needs to be. So this is what we're trying to achieve with this report.
Councillors, this is a flood recovery program, and this is a culvert that's been damaged, and along with Kratsky Road, it's damaged. It's an opportunity when they're there fixing it up to better it so that that damage doesn't happen at the next event. This isn't something pie in the sky. Don't those communities deserve to have their roads passable after an event? And Newman Road was closed last year for some 4.5 months. Along with the damage to the culvert last February, we also had works done on the TMR Road to entrance into the Valeview School, and it's very much a link road. Councillor Carl?
Madam Chair, I concur that these are very important works, and in the context of flood recovery, I share some concerns about the process. Councillor Megan's raised them, Councillor Jeff's raised them. I'd be quite happy to support this, subject to the words, subject to budgetary considerations. And the reason why I say that, and I don't diminish the importance of this and communities deserving a standard of service around the basic infrastructure, absolutely. But there are lots of funding opportunities because this is being presented as a funding opportunity. There are lots of funding opportunities across all business sectors of council. So if we choose to take this path every time an opportunity presents itself, what we're eroding the integrity of a prioritisation system that we're trying to adhere to and standardise across the organisation, so that we do ensure that we have prioritisation. I'm not suggesting that this is any less important. All I'm saying is we run the risk of another executive manager bringing a report to council at the next round of council meetings saying there's a funding opportunity and putting the words in that it is approved in the budget, therefore that's earmarked, and that the collective impacts of that on a budgetary process plus the integrity of prioritisation, in my view, is eroded. It's difficult in the consideration of these in the context of flood recovery, but in the overall interests of balancing the books and fair and equitable, I'd suggest these will probably get up, but let's stick to the process. That's my view.
Councillor Carl, we haven't looked at the projects in the budget yet. There's no budgetary, there have not been, and this needs to be designed now if it's going to be done.
I get that, Madam Chair, and I get the fact that we haven't looked at the capital project, but we'll arrive at the capital budget with stuff that's already locked away as a fait accompli because a council decision says it automatically gets up, which circumvents a correct process in my view.
What a wonderful council we had in 2011. Councillor Somerville.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the comments around the table today have been quite pertinent, and I think it's an important discussion for this council to have, to be quite honest. I think we do need to ensure that we are doing everything correctly, and I think that table I've requested will also assist us in understanding what funding is available in the current budget to do the works in preparation for the upcoming projects, and which could be funded in the normal process of priority during our budget workshops, one would say. However, you're very aware that I'm very supportive of betterment. I think if we keep doing the same thing, so I'm not questioning the projects. I do think betterment is so important in the works that we do. But I was just wondering in relation to, there was mention earlier, and I'm specifically talking about Newman Road culvert now, and Madam Chair, I think it was you, said that there were developments that were done. And so I'm just wondering, where does the no worsening effect of developments come into play with something like that, or is that too far away from those developments? It might be a planning question, I'm not sure, but I just wonder, here we are, we're looking at 1.35 million to upgrade that culvert due to developments further up the creek. And we always say there is no worsening effect in these developments that we approve. So I just wonder where that sits. If I could get someone to comment, please.
From a council planning scheme perspective, obviously with our planning development side of things, if there's new developments, obviously the historical development of the area, the culverts, under Newman Road are probably getting close to the end of their useful life. They're steel culverts. They're well over 50, 60 years old. So what's actually gone in the years gone by, has aged. They will have to be replaced at some point in the future in any case. This is probably just taking this opportunity. In regards to no worsening, that is still an element that is through the planning scheme that's put on any current day developments that come through. But obviously we're talking about a whole catchment here, and this is a fair way down the catchment, but it still gets impacted.
Thank you. Mr Mayor?
Well, look, I see it's an opportunity to get external funding to help in betterment and improve our road system, and I'm pretty comfortable. And this, I've been around the table a long time, and if you get external funding, you want to grab it and use it.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Megan O'Hara.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Mr Brady, when that work was done there at Valeview School, that was done by the state, wasn't it?
The intersection, yes.
Yeah. So was this not kind of looked at that stage, or how does that work?
Because of the flood recovery.
No, this is totally separate. The state was doing that project under their intersection upgrades under their SRS programs, which is their safety. You may be aware there was a couple of fatalities at that intersection, so the work there at that intersection was an upgrade work they did there was all to do with that. So it had nothing to do with the flood restoration. It just happened to happen, it was coincidental that the flood, the damage that happened to this culvert, happened during that period that they were doing that work.
Mm. And their jurisdiction for that didn't go back as far as the culvert. Yeah. So the road was closed. It wasn't because, firstly the road was closed because the culvert was intrafficable. And then straight after that, adding to it, was the fact that the road was closed while the state rejigged that intersection. So it's, I mean, every time there's some water comes down there, the culvert's closed, because timber and stuff comes down and washes through it. And I know because it's just right near me. And I know we use that road a lot. It's a very important road. But anyway, so where do we go?
Well, I'm quite happy to test the room and add the words subject to budget consideration, approved subject to approval through the 21-22 budget development might be the right words.
Maybe if I could assist there, maybe after approves the following 21-22 budget request for the following works subject to budget consideration.
Perfect.
Yeah. Happy with that?
3 words.
Yep.
Yep.
Madam Chair.
No, yeah, so just after the word works, before the colon.
Councillor Monhoff.
Thank you. Just before we go down that, I want to get some clarity, please, through you, Madam Chair, to Mr Brady. Will the external funding be available if we wait and run this through the budget prioritisation model?
The QRA funding is there through to the end of the program, so through to June next year. The criticality of what we're trying to do now is get the design phase underway and know what we wish to design. There's, if council supports this, probably even with the subject element to it. There's sufficient, I'm taking, and correct me if I'm wrong here, councillors, that you're supportive of these things to happen quite strongly. It's just you wish to tick the boxes to go through the process and that sort of thing. There's sufficient funding in the current budget for me to get the designs underway, noting that there's a commitment out of council to continue forward considering. We've got to go through the design phase. Obviously that's over the next couple of months, and obviously if council, for whatever reason, changes its mind, those plans would just go into the drawer until another day.
Okay, thank you.
So we can get underway with what you're saying, if that there, but obviously the commitment, we won't move into the construction phase of those culverts until...
Can I ask you a question, Mr Brady? How much does it cost to design a culvert such as the Newman Road culvert?
It's around about 10%, about 150,000 of that order. So,
and it's time, it takes time to...
Yeah, time is our critical thing at the moment, more so than other things. So there's a lead in time to get these projects up and running. So if this is the resolution that goes through and that makes council feels a lot more comfortable with that, I can still keep the ball rolling.
That was thank you, Madam Chair. That was my question. If those words are added, subject to budget considerations, is that going to slow you down or impede the work in any way?
No, the only risk is I put councillors is I'll move forward on the basis that this work will happen, so I'll move forward and get the designs underway. But on the basis that obviously you have the final call when you do the you bring down the 21-22 budget in June. Through the
so, are you moving that, Councillor MacDonald? Is there a seconder? Councillor Megan O'Hara-Sullivan. Those in favour? Against? Thank you. That ends the Infrastructure Committee for February. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mike.
We having lunch?
Is that lunch?
No, just the rest of the planning.
Oh, we've got the confidential.
And water.
It's not a water project.
And water.
Pleased they weren't sitting here in 2011. That's what I'm pleased about. We would never had anything. Or to have a damn spillway if you can't drive on your road.
Losing people and all. Have I lost him? Nancy.
Cancer that runs through here. Sorry? There's a cancer that runs through here. This is ridiculous. I can't believe that just happened. No, he's not. No, he's not. No, he's not. He's not. He's not. In 2011, we're prioritising it or something.
That's gone.
They are. The budget's in there. They could last time we did something. It's political. And I'm heading up this portfolio that means the most to most people, and nobody gives it any bracelets. Anything water? Our budget's for the last 2 years.
Why is it talking?
Park's the same. Maybe I don't belong here anymore. When you talk about fuels, right, go and have a look at that colour. It's all broken. Go out and have a look at them on the road. Go and have a look at it physically, you can see it. Both carrying tremendous traffic.
Are we waiting for something?
It is only going to get worse.
Okay, we'll resume the planning and development meeting. Can I have someone move that we move into confidential? Councillor Melissa Taylor, Councillor Nancy Somerville. All those in favour? 7 is can I have someone move the acceptance of that confidential report? Councillor Carl, Councillor McMahon, all those in favour? It's carried. And item number 8, can I have someone move the acceptance of that report, the regional enforcement actions? Councillor Antonio and Councillor Bonhoff, all those in favour? It's carried. Thank you. That ends the planning and development meeting. Thank you.
You going through yours now, Beth?
We going?
Yeah, go on.
You going to keep going, everybody? Yep.
So there's a spin through No, I won't.
All right, councillors. We now move on to item 5 of the Water and Waste Committee agenda, which is the Highfields Water Supply land acquisition. We're joined by Natalie Plum. Hi, Natalie.
Hi.
Yep. Yep. Can I please have a mover and a seconder to go into confidential? Councillor Somerville, Councillor O'Hara Sullivan, all in favour? Brendan, are we back? We're back. All right, so councillors, the recommendation there before you is in two parts. First part, that the CEO be delegated authority to negotiate and finalise the acquisition of the relevant portion of the properties generally in accordance with attachments 2 and 3 in the confidential report titled Highfields Water Supply Land Acquisition, and part 2, in the event that council is unsuccessful in relation to one above, the council exercise its powers as reconstructing authority under the Acquisition of Land Act 1967 to issue a notice of intention to resume to the owners of the properties affected by the land requirements, generally in accordance with attachments 2 and 3. Do I have a mover?
Could I suggest an amendment, please, Madam Chair?
Councillor Somerville.
That we actually add point 3, that the just trying to think, we're out of confidential, that the valuation be supplied in some form before the ordinary meeting.
Madam Chair, in fairness, I think it's covered pretty well in the recommendations, my personal view.
I'll look for.
You have a.
I'll look for a seconder for Councillor Somerfield's proposed additional recommendation there. It does not look like it's going to be seconded, Councillor Somerville. So we've got the two recommendations that are before us. Do I have a mover? Councillor Carl, and a seconder, Councillor Antonio. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you again. And we don't need a division in the committee meeting. Oh, sorry, councillors, we may need a division there. Brian? Sorry, councillors, because of my declaration, we will need a division on that vote. All in favour? So it's Councillor Somerville opposed, all else in favour. Thank you. So, councillors, that concludes the meeting today. Time, Wendy? 12:22. Thank you very much.